Iran was not always the country the world sees today. Before the revolution, Inqilab of 1979, it was one of the West's closest allies. A monarchy, rapidly modernizing, rich in oil, and deeply connected to global powers. But beneath that surface was a long history of tension, control, and resistance. To understand Iran and the West, you have to begin with oil. By the 1940s, Iran's most valuable resource was controlled not by Iranians, but by the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. The arrangement heavily favored Britain. Iran received only a fraction of the profits, while foreign companies controlled extraction, refining, and global distribution. For many Iranians, this was not just unfair, it was a symbol of national humiliation. Their country had the resource, but not the power over it. That frustration gave rise to a man who would change everything, Mohammad Mossadegh. Mossadegh was not a revolutionary in the traditional sense. He was a nationalist, a constitutional politician who believed Iran should control its own wealth. In 1951, he made a bold and historic decision. He nationalized Iran's oil industry. To ordinary Iranians, this was justice. For the first time, their country was asserting control over its own resources. But to the West, especially Britain, this was a direct threat to economic and strategic interests. What followed exposed a deeper problem. Iran had the oil, but it did not yet have the system. It lacked the industrial capacity, refining infrastructure, and global networks needed to sustain production independently. In response, Britain imposed a global embargo, effectively isolating Iran from the international market. Combined with Iran's limited capacity, oil production collapsed. Revenue dropped sharply. The economy began to suffer. This created a difficult reality. Iran wanted independence, but independence required capacity, and that capacity was still controlled by the very powers it was trying to break away from. At the same time, Mossadegh's power began to expand. Iran was still a constitutional monarchy, with Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi holding authority over the military. But in 1952, Mossadegh demanded control over the Ministry of War. The Shah refused. Mossadegh resigned. Massive protests erupted across Iran, forcing the Shah to bring him back and concede power. Mossadegh returned stronger than before, now controlling both the government and the military. From that moment, the balance shifted. To his supporters, he was defending Iran's sovereignty. To his critics, he was centralizing too much power. Meanwhile, the crisis with the West intensified. In the context of the Cold War, the United States began to see Iran not just as an economic issue, but as a strategic one. There were fears that instability could open the door to communist influence. In 1953, those fears turned into intervention. The CIA and MI6, in alignment with the Shah's regime, orchestrated what became known as the 1953 Iranian coup d'etat. Mossadegh was overthrown, arrested, and removed from power. The Shah returned, but this time with
far greater authority. On the surface, stability was restored. Oil began flowing again under a new arrangement that reintroduced Western companies into Iran's energy sector. The country entered a period of rapid modernization under the Shah. But something fundamental had changed. The monarchy was now closely associated with foreign intervention. Many Iranians no longer saw the Shah as an independent ruler, but as one sustained by Western power. And that perception carried consequences. To maintain control, the regime relied heavily on repression, particularly through Savak, which monitored, detained, and silenced opposition. Economically, Iran was growing. Cities expanded, industries developed, Western culture became more visible, but the benefits were uneven. Wealth gaps widened, political freedoms remained limited, cultural tensions deepened. By the 1970s, opposition to the Shah was no longer isolated. It was widespread and diverse. Leftists opposed his alignment with Western capitalism. Nationalists resented the memory of Mossadegh's overthrow. Religious groups rejected the cultural and social changes taking place under his rule. Among the religious opposition, one figure became increasingly influential: Ruhollah Khomeini. From exile, he criticized both the Shah and Western influence, framing the struggle as not just political, but moral and cultural. These groups did not share the same vision for Iran's future, but they shared a common goal: the Shah had to go. In 1978, protests intensified. Strikes spread across the country, including in the oil sector, bringing the economy to a standstill. Demonstrations grew larger, and government crackdowns only fueled more resistance. By 1979, the system collapsed. The Shah left Iran. Khomeini returned to a country ready for change. The monarchy was overthrown, and Iran became an Islamic republic. What began as a broad coalition revolution quickly took a more defined direction. Religious leadership consolidated power, while many of the groups that had participated in the Thawra were sidelined. The revolution had been collective, but its outcome was not. After 1979, Iran's relationship with the West fundamentally changed. The country that had once been a close ally became a central adversary. Events like the U.S. Embassy hostage crisis deepened hostility. Over time, sanctions, political tensions, and regional conflicts reinforced that divide. By the 2000s, the relationship was defined less by cooperation and more by suspicion and confrontation, particularly around nuclear development and regional influence. But to understand that tension, you have to go back to oil, back to Mossadegh, back to the moment a country tried to take control of its own resources without yet controlling the system behind them. Iran's story is not simply about opposition to the West. It is about the struggle between sovereignty and dependency. A country trying to define itself in a world where power is never just internal. And in the end, one truth remains: power is rarely destroyed. It is only transferred.
Worldview by Charles.
Unraveling the truth through history and power. Like, subscribe, and share to get more content like this.